Today, we're going to discuss the most valuable baseball cards, sets, and rookies of the junk wax era 1984 to 1993. And one of the things that is important in terms of looking for ways to kind of free yourself of some of these cards by selling them is to familiarize yourself with the numerous avenues that are available for you to sell your cards. Certainly eBay is one of the top that people typically go to, but there are many others, as you and I can see in these slides that I'm presenting now. But I also did a YouTube that went at great lengths to talk about these different venues in which you can sell cards, and certainly these junk wax era cards. So there's another YouTube that we discussed profiting from selling your baseball card collection, and we mentioned some key points. So just to review those, that there are tips on that YouTube, as well as explanation for the recovery of the card market and the correction of the card market, as well as profiting by knowing who is in the Hall of Fame and who is potentially going to make the Hall of Fame, as well as investing in baseball cards and which ones are the best to invest in. So if you were to survey the internet and all of the YouTubes and all of the websites and all of the seminars and all the sales promotions for various cards, you would come up with approximately this kind of summary of what are the most valuable cards on the market today. And it changes sometimes from month to month and year to year, but the ebb and flow seems to concentrate on these particular cards that were valuable from the era of 1984 to 1989. And most of you will be familiar, but remember, it's not just the player, it's not just necessarily the Hall of Fame, it's their popularity as well as the particular brand of card for that particular time. And specifically, you'll see it concentrates on rookies because those tend to be the most valuable. So we have the Don Mattingly 84 Donruss cards, the Roger Clemens and Kirby Puckett Flair Update cards of 1984. We have the USA Baseball of Mark McGuire 1985, the 1986 Jose Canseco, the 1987 Topps Traded Barry Bonds, 1987 Donruss Greg Maddux, the 1988 Score Rookies and Updates of Craig Biggio and Roberto Alomar, the 1989 Classic Update, not update, but the Upper Deck of Ken Griffey, the Randy Johnson card, which oscillates from 1989 Upper Deck to 1989 Fleer, as well as the era card for Bill Ripken with the obscenity written on the back. Most valuable cards of the junk wax era that are reported in all these surveys, it comes up pretty much the same for the 1990 to 1992, are the Leaf 1990 cards, certainly the Frank Thomas rookie card, but also the Sammy Sosa, as well as the Larry Walker rookie card, the iconic Bo Jackson in the score set, where he is football and baseball, the rookie of Stadium Club of Jeff Bagwell, and then a whole group of cards from the 1992 Bowman with the Mike Piazza, Chipper Jones, Mariano Rivera, Pedro Martinez, and Trevor Hoffman, as well as Manny Ramirez and Carlos Delgado. Then the 1992, closing it out with 1994, we have Jeff Kent in the Fleer Update. We have the USA team cards of Garcia Parra as well as Veritek, the Fleer Ultra Update of the rookies of Ivan Rodriguez and Juan Gonzalez, the classic card that probably is one of the most valuable of this particular time is the Upper Deck SP of Derek Jeter Chrome, as well as the Johnny Damon Chrome. And then you have the Andy Pettitte, the USA card of Tard Helden, the Topps Finest of Nolan Ryan, the iconic of Michael Jordan playing baseball. We have the again the SP for Alex Rodriguez and the Bowman for Billy Wagner, as well as for Jorge Posada. So in this era and these particular cards, there are many kind of contributions and surveys and YouTubes about which cards are the best sets. And so this was the kind of conglomeration of all people's inputs, and it will change from time to time depending on which people you ask. But basically, you can see those particular cards and designs as we go through the Topps 87, the 93 Upper Deck, the 91 Studio, 92 Fleer Ultra, 92 Bowman, 90 Score, 91 Stadium Club, 90 Leaf, 87 Fleer, 93 Studio, 1989 Upper Deck, 1987 Topps. And these were kind of the premier sets of that particular time. Unfortunately, the value is minimal because of the glut, but nonetheless, taken together, these are the cards that are kind of often picked to be the best sets. And then you have those that rank as the worst sets of that particular era. And you have the 90 Donruss, the 88 Score, the 89 Bowman, 92 Score, 88 Topps, 91 Donruss, 91 Fleer Ultra, 89 Score, 91 Fleer, 88 Donruss, and 90 Fleer. So how to profit selling cards from the 1980 junk card era is to familiarize yourself with what cards are the most valuable. And again, looking at these lists that are promoted in terms of which have the top value, you'll see a kind of redundancy of what we've already talked about in terms of the cards. We're kind of going a few years before the junk card era, but still there was a lot of cards produced from 1980 to 1983. And you have all these cards, many of which we've already mentioned, and most of them are the rookie cards, and most of them are the cards in the particular sets and manufacturers that would be the most valuable. So it continues on until we get to 1989. So if we look at the Hall of Fame rookies and non-Hall of Famers of the 1980s, this is sort of the combined ranking of all of these year by year. And you can look at it, and we'll go over this in review of the particular cards of each player that are the most valuable. So the number one card of each player has been already introduced, but we're going to go kind of expand that a little bit. So even though they're not as valuable and may not carry as much profit as the original rookie in the original set, they also are basically for collectors valuable cards to include in their collection. So we have the rookie Henderson of the 1980s, certainly the rookie card, but then you have the other manufacturers that also produce cards of Rickey Henderson during those early years, including the 3D Superstar card on Kellogg's of Rickey Henderson. Then we move into 1981 and we begin to see the few rookies that really kind of made it into prominence, as I said, the Hall of Fame, and that being Harold Baines, and we have his cards, and we also have the Tim Raines cards that are so often considered the most valuable. Now, as we go on and talk about the different cards that are valuable during this particular era, you're going to kind of refer to the previous YouTube that kind of pointed out that the Topps Finest, as well as the Donruss Elite, as well as the Desert Shield, are going to carry a lot of value. So we can include those in all of these lists because they really are among the most valuable, even though they may not be the rookie card of that particular player. Additionally, you'll see in a lot of these lists, you'll see their minor league cards, which were produced in smaller amounts and kind of way before that people even began to think that these would be superstars. So those cards often contain a lot of value. So you'll have this kind of the rookie card, many times other producers of that player as a rookie, or you'll have the second and third year, or you'll have the Finest or the Elite or the Shield, and then you'll have the minor league cards. So we move on, and Cal Ripken kind of carries a lot of weight in terms of value at this particular time, particularly the 82 Topps update card, and then you have the regular 92 Topps, 82 Topps, and then you have the Fleer and the Donruss. And here we have the Donruss Elite signature, and we have the Finest, as well as a rookie card. Moving on, these were kind of two players that maybe were not totally expected, not undeserving, but not totally expected to be in the Hall of Fame, because one was inducted as a designated hitter, being Edgar Martinez, the other being a relief pitcher. And certainly they deserve to be in, but kind of a different kind of entry into the Hall, and maybe not as well known as some of the other players that we have mentioned. Then we move to three players that are really kind of prominent in this particular history of baseball, and the 93 rookies, and you have the Tony Gwynn as well as the Ryan Sandberg, and later we'll see the other player, Wade Boggs, that was key in terms of this 1983 series. And again, you'll see there are other rookie cards as well as their minor league card, the Finest card, and so forth. And then here we see the Wade Boggs, and then beneath you'll see the Don Mattingly, who did not make the Hall of Fame, and we've discussed the reasons why he has not made it, but nonetheless, a very popular player, certainly during this period of the 84 and beyond. And you again see the Topps Finest and his rookie card in the minors and so forth. So then we have Roger Clemens, who basically people feel should be in the Hall of Fame except for PEDs, and may or may not make it eventually, but certainly a popular player, as well as we already mentioned Kirby Puckett, and you see his most expensive card, which is that Fleer Update 1984, as well as kind of an interesting card in terms of the Dream Team, where they're kind of out of character in terms of their appearance and the card itself. Moving on, we have two players that have not and may not ever make the Hall of Fame because their use of steroids, but very popular at the time. In fact, these cards went for a high price back then in the mid 80s. And you have the Mark McGwire. We already mentioned his USA card, but again, you can see there's several minor league cards in this list, as well as Hoken Seiko, the major card being that 1986 Donruss, but also several cards in Fleer, as well as other cards in Donruss. Moving on, we have the Barry Bonds, another player who is currently not in the Hall of Fame due to use of PEDs and allegations of steroids and so forth. Very interesting group of cards is this 87 Donruss, because you'll see on one of the cards it's labeled Barry Bonds. It's certainly not Barry Bonds, it's Johnny Wright. So kind of an era card, and these will always call for more. And you have other cards that are interesting that came out in terms of classic, as well as a promotional for Toys R Us cards. Then we have another player that, you know, is sort of on the fringe in terms of popularity. A lot of people know him, but he did make the Hall of Fame and therefore garnered some recognition. But he's really in the midst of that junk wax era, and that's Barry Larkin. Moving on, we have the great pitchers of the Atlanta Braves back in the late 80s, and certainly Greg Maddux with his cards. And again, you'll see here he has a minor league card, and certainly Tom Glavine, several cards. He also had a rookie card in that 1988 score, traded and rookies. Then another to complete that triage of great pitchers is John Smolson. You'll see his 1988 Fleer card, as well as the Bowman and the others that are available in this 1988-1989 time period. Again, back to Randy Johnson, we see that probably the highest rookie cards he has is either that Upper Deck or that Fleer, and there's that Fleer Update also that can carry a higher price. Moving on to 88, we have already discussed the score, rookie and traded, where you have the Biggio and Alomar, but then you have other cards in terms of that were printed by other manufacturers that were the rookie cards that are also sometimes in demand, except there are so many to pick from. Certainly Ken Griffey, all of his cards were of immense value back in the late 80s, early 90s. They've lost a lot of value because of the knowledge that there are so many printed, but still holds this value in terms of being worth something, is the 89 Upper Deck, as well as other cards that you'll see here on this slide. So again, reviewing this whole group, we have some other input from other sites that kind of talk not only about those rookies and Hall of Famers and popular players, but we also have them choosing cards, as you'll see in this kind of conglomeration of different cards that might be surprising. For example, the Dale Murphy card, a lot of very popular player at the time. You have era cards like the Greg Nettles, where they spell his name wrong. You have Will Clark, who we'll talk about later, that possibly should have made the Hall of Fame. You'll even have kind of the bust of the draft. In other words, players that were first in the draft but really never made it, and you'll see that in the Ron Kilgard, and you'll see another player that we'll mention later. You also have players that this is not their rookie card, but some cards within the different sets that became valuable for the star players like Pete Rose and other players like Eric Davis. You'll also see another Eric card in John Littlefield that's sometimes in high demand because it shows him as a left-handed pitcher, where he's really a right-handed pitcher. It's kind of reverse negative in the photography. Several Griffey cards, as well as Bo Jackson cards on this list. Then you'll have just kind of some unique cards that are thrown out that people would like to collect. Certainly even the mascot, the San Diego Chicken, we'll talk about in the past. When we talked about Fleer, we talked about there was no rookie card in Topps for Maury Wells, so they kind of created a card and made that kind of available in a series later on in his career. You have the Delano de Shields, which came out in OPG, but that's the only rookie card that he had that particular year. It later became a part of the Topps network. You have cards, as they say, of other players that were popular, but not their rookie cards, like the George Brett. Then you have the combination cards, like you'll have George Brett and Roy Krug, two great hitters, as well as you'll see at the bottom, Don Winfield and Don Mattingly. And you'll see the Tom Seaver. You'll see a Donruss Diamond King of Pete Rose, kind of an oddity card that you see with Glenn Harper with the snake, as well as in the right hand corner, the Mickey Hatcher with a huge glove. And then we have another rookie that was promoted to be the next great and high draft pick, but kind of was a bust in the big leagues. And then you have a very unique and somewhat valuable card in the Topps Update 82 of Ozzie Smith. That's where he was traded from the San Diego Padres to the St. Louis Cardinals. So kind of putting these cards together, again, looking at not just the particular card, but other cards that are similar that may go for more profits than the other common cards, are the San Diego Chicken. You'll see Rafael Palmeiro, again, another person who could have made the Hall of Fame except for accusations of PED. We've already talked about the two rookies that really were stars but never made it, and Darlon Kittle and Joe Charbonneau. Mickey Hatcher holds the record for the highest average in a World Series at 750. And even though he batted that during the World Series, he was not chosen the MVP of that particular World Series at the time. We have the interesting player of Jim Abbott, who had a reasonable good career, despite the fact that he was missing part of his right arm, and still was able to perform at a major league level in spite of that ability. And you have Wally Joyner, who was considered to be, a super rookie, and he had a good year, but never enough to kind of place him into the Hall of Fame. And then another base runner who was incredible on the bases and fast and so forth, and hit for average, was a guy called Willie McGee, which people who are familiar with him kind of like to collect cards of Willie McGee. Then you have players that it's a big question. How come they didn't make the Hall of Fame? And we've argued that, so you can go back to other YouTubes, and that being the Joe Carter, who was a real power hitter. And again, we see that elite card show up. And you'll also see Fred McGriff, who's still arguably considered for the Hall of Fame. And you'll see his minor league card as well as the elite card here. Then a very popular and kind of personable baseball player was Al Horshauer, more known for his performances in the World Series. Never enough stats to kind of make the Hall of Fame, but certainly a well-known player. Then you have a power hitter, and remember that power hitters are what people like to collect. So you have the Cecil Fielder, and then his son, Prince Fielder, also became an extremely big power hitter of the time, as well as this Gary Sheffield, who again should have perhaps and may eventually enter the Hall of Fame, but there's questions about PEDs with him. Then a player that many people are surprised never made the Hall of Fame, especially because of his popularity and contribution to the San Francisco Giants during their heydays in the 80s, was Will Clark. And a player that was a star but not of really Hall of Fame caliber was Chris Sabo for the Cincinnati Reds. Player who was kind of the cornerstone of the Cubs, who were kind of winless, but still between Ron Santo, yes. And then there was Ryan Sandberg, and then there was Mark Grace, that kind of never really kind of got the Hall of Fame votes, but still very popular players for that Cubs team. Eric Davis, because of health problems, never really became a candidate, didn't play enough years, didn't play enough at bats to be considered for the Hall of Fame, but really a great player when he did play. Again, you'll see his minor league card and the Topps Finest card amongst the most valuable for him. Moving on, we have two very popular players back when the Mets were kind of really competitive. And that was Darryl Strawberry with his kind of Donruss card in 1984, and Dwight Gooden with his Donruss card in 1985. And you see other cards that were at the time that they were really kind of tearing the league apart, very popular, and a higher price, a higher demand for those particular cards. Then we have kind of a hodgepodge here of players that kind of people like to collect. Certainly Kirk Gibson because of his World Series heroics, as well as Harold Reynolds, more for being a TV sports commentator probably, but he was an excellent player for the Mariners. Andres Galarraga was a highly required hitter for the Expos as well as other teams, called the Big Cat. You have the teammate of Will Clark during the San Francisco heydays, in Matt Williams, who also became a manager. And then a very unique player that came in more for his kind of culture and coming from Mexico, and kind of his delivery as a pitcher and so forth, and became very, very popular, and that being Fernando Venezuela. These are his cards that at the time, brought a pretty good return for investment, and less so now, but still like kind of a card people like to collect, who are real collectors. So those are the 80s. And now we're moving into the 90s junk card era and talking about what cards during this particular time, when there were so many cards, it was kind of hit its peak in terms of numbers, but numbers of not only cards, but numbers of sets and numbers of different inserts and so forth for these players that turned out to be stars during that particular time. So here's a list, and just give you some idea over the course of time what these cards have ranged from in terms of sell back value, in terms of what returns you could get if you kind of sold these. And so certainly we've talked about the Derek Jeter SP Upper Deck that has gone for as high as 8,500. And remember, these higher demands are based on the card being a PSA 10 or at least a 9. So it sounds very attractive, but it's really hard to get those kind of ratings. Not even just because you took care of them, but basically if the manufacturer to you, in terms of when you got that card in a pack, it was perfect in terms of the edges, in terms of the borders, in terms of the gloss of picture and everything else. So even though you may have what appears to be a perfect Derek Jeter card, it may not go for that. But you see the range was 300 to 850 for that, 8,500 for that card. Then you have David Ortiz, who just recently made the Hall of Fame. His card, rookie in the Fleer Ultra, sold for as much as 2,000. Alex Rodriguez, again, the SP Upper Deck, went for 7,500. Mariano Rivera in the Bowman, 900. And Beltran, 500 in the Bowman Chrome, Mike Piazza and the Flair Update, 800, Vladimir Guerrero in the Bowman's Best, 900, Roy Halladay, who met an untimely early death, in the Bowman Chrome, up to 1,000, Frank Thomas, Leaf, got 250. However, he has another card that's an error card we'll talk about in a little bit, that card sometimes by tops even goes for higher, but it's again in short supply, so therefore it would demand a higher price. And then the Andrew Jones Bowman's Best. So these were pretty much the cards that have gone for the most, and other cards may take their place along the way, but gives you some idea. So here we have the picture of those cards we've just kind of discussed, and you can look at them and look at that list and see if you have them. If you have them, then timing is everything in terms of selling these cards for a considerable profit. Then it kind of goes down, and we have the Sammy Sosa, who never made the Hall of Fame, but real popular player, and I think he hit over 60 home runs 3 times. And then you have certainly the Hall of Famers, the Chipper Jones, Mike Piazza, and Jeff Bagwell, and Carlos Delgado, who is potential Hall of Famer. Moving on, we have a few other outstanding cards for the Jack Rider. Maybe not certainly Hall of Famers, but certainly cards that people would like to collect. We already mentioned some of these. There's also the Ryan Howard who played for the Phillies in the Upper Deck rookie card. Again, a Fleer Update card of Jeff Kent. And we have the potential player in Wagner, who could be a Hall of Famer. Then kind of a unique insert that was in the tops, which is George Bush when he played baseball for Yale. And then a player who was very good, but not real popular in terms of his behavior and attitude, in Joey Bell. Moving on, another few outstanding cards and that potentially could still make the Hall of Fame, like Carlos Beltran, Adrian Beltran. Kind of a no-brainer would be Justin Verlander into the Hall of Fame. We've already talked about Chipper Jones, but here's his Bowman card. Jim Thome, both the Bowman and the Upper Deck. Ivan Rodriguez, Roberto Erlemar, and also Alex Rodriguez, as well as Martinez. Some cards that are kind of on the fringe, but people who like to collect good players and popular players, these are some that they would look to. Some may have potential Hall of Famers. In fact, Scott Rowland is one of those that's kind of right on the cusp of being elected to the Hall of Fame as well. If we talk about Aaron Jones, the Ryan Howard, the Bo Abro, Torrey Hunter, Jimmy Rollins, Tim Hudson, Jim Lincecum, all of these players were popular players and had very good careers, but maybe not good enough to make the Hall of Fame. And then in those players that have made the Hall of Fame, we're again looking like we did before in terms of not just their rookie in the most valuable manufactured set, but also other cards that were rookies or certainly special cards. So we have the Larry Walker card. And what was interesting at the end there, you'll see Larry Walker with Grissom and DeShields, and that was a replacement card for this particular card of Mike Witt. It was rejected or taken out of circulation because of a uniform malfunction in terms of, so they took it out and replaced it with that other card. Then you have the Mike Piazza, and it kind of oscillates between the update and the Bowman in terms of which one's most valuable, but you have several to choose from in other sets. Moving on, we have probably the most popular of that particular era is the Darryl Jr. We already mentioned his SP card, but there's other cards that also kind of carry some pretty good value at this time, especially if they're in close to mint condition. But you have several cards that kind of came out by different brands and so forth at the particular time. Then we have the Frank Thomas we already mentioned, and now we're kind of looking at that card of Frank Thomas in the tops where the logo is missing. So if you have this era card, it could really demand a pretty high price because it was kind of in short supply. Certainly the Bowman, the Leaf 1990 rookie card. And then you also have the minor league card that is kind of well sought after, as well as several other cards that you see that are listed here. Then we have the Alex Rodriguez, many cards, kind of early cards. He was kind of a phenomenon that was about to happen. So you have even cards that are in the presets and so forth, rookies and beyond. And that one card is the SP card at the left-hand corner that kind of demands the most that we talked about. Now we move into two players that have kind of grown in popularity because they made the Hall of Fame. They were always great players. And we have David Arias, which is really David Ortiz, and his rookie card that calls for the most. And then, let's see, interesting enough for the Roy Halladay, most of his kind of best cards came in the Bowman and kind of chrome sets and what have you. Now we move into Chipper Jones. Chipper Jones has a whole kind of array of cards that are considerably valuable because he was number one round draft pick, as well as turned out to be a Hall of Famer and had a great career. And his card that demands the most is that Desert Shield card. So if one has that, one can basically claim kind of a good profit from it. Then you have the Jim Thome cards and several cards, and his upper deck seems to carry a lot of popularity for that particular player. And then we move to the Jeff Bagwell, which is one of those cards during that Stadium Club set that was unique in terms of his rookie card that kind of carries the most. But you also have his Cape Cod League card, which is fairly valuable when he was in the minor leagues. Ivan Rodriguez, you have his Fleer Ultra Update card, which carries the most demand, but he has several other rookie cards in different sets. We move on to then we have Trevor Hoffman, who was, again, like the Lee Smith, kind of a reliever and maybe not as kind of popular, but because he had such a great career, he certainly made the Hall of Fame and warrants, got some profit from his card. And then even though this was not his rookie year, obviously, he'd been in the league for quite a while, but he's so popular that Nolan Ryan cards still kind of sell well. And you'll see kind of several unique cards in these sets, like throwing a football or dressed in a tux or even a gold-plated card for Nolan Ryan. that can carry some value. And you have two incredible pitchers during that era in the Pedro Martinez. He had a brother, so that's kind of interesting card where he's with his brother. They were both in the Dodgers, Pedro and Raymond Martinez. Probably the Bowman card carries the most value. And then you have this incredible reliever, kind of the top reliever of all time, Mariano Rivera, with his top card being that Bowman 92 card, but several other cards also kind of carry a decent profit. Moving on, we have Mike Mussina, who made the Hall of Fame, certainly popular in the Baltimore, Washington area, but was a great pitcher. His Topps Finest sells for quite a bit. And then one of the fantastic hitters of the time, Vladimir Guerrero, many people kind of know today, his son, Junior, who is a phenomenal hitter. So this father and son team is pretty incredible. And these are the different cards. You'll see that the Bowman still rates on top in terms of its highest valued card. We have the Sammy Sosa. Again, we talked about him being popular, probably having trouble making the Hall of Fame because of PEDs, certainly steroid use and all his home runs. And these are the various cards that kind of carry the most value, probably the Leaf as well as the Donruss cards because of the first and earliest cards. But he also has some minor league cards that carry some value. A player that chances of making the Hall of Fame are limited because of injuries as well as his use of PEDs, and yet if you look at his stats, incredible hitter, home run hitter, and baseball player in Juan Gonzalez, a player that kind of got a lot of attention because of his antics on the field and so forth with Manny Ramirez, but an incredible hitter certainly during the first 5 to 6 years of his career, and many cards are available on him during this card glut as well as those finest cards we talked about. A big popular player was Bo Jackson when he hit the card market. Everybody rushed around for all of his cards, and he has several, and even the classic card sells for quite a bit where he's in the baseball and the Auburn University football jersey. You have classic cards, you have minor league cards, you have them dressed in football and baseball gear, highlights, and so forth and so on. So a popular card, but really because of the glut, many of them are available, and so they don't really call for a high profit. Michael Jordan, again, now a baseball player and also a basketball player, so that dual kind of makes him unique. And so lots and lots of cards of Michael Jordan when he kind of played for the minor leagues for the White Sox. Some of them initially, because they were special print cards supposedly, garnered a lot of attention, but it's been found out that there was plenty of them to go around, so it doesn't carry as much value. You also have the Deion Sanders, who again, the football together with the baseball, a popular celebrity, kind of advertisements and so forth and so on. He's now back to coaching college football. There's a lot of controversy in terms of where he may or may not go next as a coach, but another card that is popular and has a demand, but less so in terms of a profit margin. Now we move kind of further on into the 80s, and these early cards kind of at the cusp of that 84, 85 and beyond. And we have, as we talked about Hall of Famers, those who are no doubters to be first or second round ballot of the Hall of Fame. And certainly Albert Pujols stands high and above that in terms of all his stats. And his card, as always, from the beginning it came out in Bowman to the present, has already demanded a higher price tag than most. Miguel Cabrera, certainly in terms of his hitting and prowess and winning the triple MVPs and so forth, he certainly is going to be an easy shoe-in, as well as we talked about Verlander. Mike Trout, no doubt about it. His card is incredibly expensive, the autograph Bowman card. Then you have Mark Scherzer, Clayton Kershaw, and even a player who's just really come on the scene, but already people are picking him as a shoe-in for the Hall of Fame, is Soto and Ohtani. So here we have the several, and certainly there's many cards, and many more valuable. The first two here are the most valuable of the Albert Pujols. Another player that probably will be a shoe-in for the Hall of Fame when he gets eligible for the voting will be Ichiro Suzuki, and we see some of his cards that are more valuable than others. Talked about Dustin Verlander as well as Kershaw will be in that, as well as the Ohtani and the Soto. And then we have the Miguel Cabreras. And again, you're seeing all the kind of rookie cards, many of them being in the Bowman, and also the Max Scherzer cards, the Mike Trouts, many cards. And parallels and so forth, that he continues to play and continues to kind of get the respect. And now we have also in that mix, we have the Bryce Harper, who is a phenomenal player and has had a phenomenal career. And there's a very good chance, some people argue, but most people think he has a very good chance for the Hall of Fame. Adrian Beltre, if he can get through the PED, criticism and allegations, he should be a Hall of Famer in terms of his stats, as well as Carlos Beltran. And even though the Bowman cards, especially the Chrome, warrant the most value, you'll see that his top card, because of the mistake that was made, that another player, John LeBron, was actually on his card, and vice versa. So it becomes a more valuable card, probably in shorter supply. So if you are interested in learning additional information about baseball card industry, the history of baseball cards, profiting and investing in baseball cards, or ideas to bring the fun back to collecting, be sure to follow us below. Feel free to view our library of YouTube videos, and please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Also, check our eBay store, where we have available for sale many of the cards shown on these videos.